10 years ago, I think it was in DC at a Media Impact Funders event, we introduced this idea of a project which we were just starting at the time with an Alaska Native organization. We had no idea if the project would get out there, would fully work. And so I'm going to do a quick update on that project because it changed a lot of our lives and talk about how the learnings from that project we're going to apply to our first investigative journalism game. So we were approached a little over 10 years ago by a pioneering Alaska Native tribal organization called the Cook Inlet Tribal Council. Their CEO, Gloria O'Neill, was tasked by the elders and her board to look at models of self-sufficiency for the organization. They built a culture of self-sufficiency for their peoples, but their organization was largely dependent on government grants and resource extraction. And they wanted her to be bold in terms of impact investing in businesses that could be aligned with their values. She also really wanted to empower their youth. A lot of the youth were hurting, and a lot of the youth were looking at popular media and seeing their culture horribly misrepresented. And so the challenge that she gave us was, you know, video games are one of the most powerful mediums in the world. Video games, they let you step into different shoes and identities. You have agency to act. Games are about verbs, thinking verbs, action verbs. You act around a goal that you're invested in, sometimes individually, sometimes collectively. You fail evocatively, safely. You get feedback, crucially. You get feedback on how to move closer towards your goal, feedback from the game, feedback from peers, feedback from mentors. That's behavior change, that's learning, if effectively harnessed. And it's not easy, but it is an incredibly powerful medium, billions of lean-forward hours. So Gloria just felt like they should do something in video games. And they saw a talk that I had done at Games for Change and invited us up to Alaska. And we went on a crazy 2-year journey together. We developed an inclusive development process. This wasn't a game about the Alaska Native folks. It was a game made inclusively with them. We put together a team of world-class game makers, 36 Alaska elders, writers, Native storytellers, and we spent time in each other's world. We spent a lot of time up on the North Slope, and they spent a lot of time going to video game conferences. And it was a fascinating mix of cultures, and we really got to know each other over the years and over this 2-year process. The very process was one of interdependence, and that was the North Star for the entire game. We were interdependent as an organization, and we developed a game. It's a 2-player cooperative game. Cooperative games are fascinating because you have to solve problems together, and it reinforces interdependence between the players, in this case a young Iñupiat girl and an adorable fox, interdependence with nature, and interdependence with the spirit world. That was the North Star of the game. These are just some images from the making of the game, but relevant to this conference. There's been a lot of talk about documentary films. We shot 40 hours of footage as research, and it was so interesting to hear the stories of the elders, the writers, the storytellers. We really wanted our players to experience that, and we knew if we put up a website, they would never go. If we stuck them up on YouTube, people wouldn't find them. So we cut them into 26 short 2 to 3 minute documentaries that get unlocked as you play the game. And they were optional. They were highly produced, short, and relevant, and it turned out to be one of the most effective parts of the game. So if you play the trailer, you'll get a taste for the game. This was our announcement trailer, so you can get a taste and feel for the game.
Imanga kanga. Tuarolu qangexillaablegi kinguneeking. Oleartuarta qangexipkaruga inglerosia nuna. Sule qanoq iñunekput iluani. Agla shukrawat utuqqat qulaaqtuat alqarluta tatqamna avictuarutaamuppat taamna sivunerevlu mumina piiraaliortu Katershiro, Kovirosu Tikaktuanik, Iñunik, Iñula, Ikayutik Shamik, Tikaldar. Allaginin Iñusini, Aglan Sevunrat Atir. Kangik Sitaw Rau Kaktuit, Asin Tamna, Iling, Avictual Lasik.
Thanks. So the game is in the Iñupiat language. It's based on a story passed down thousands of years, which is fascinating. And why do certain stories help one generation guide another? Why do they last? It was absolutely fascinating. We had no idea how the game would do, but we put it out there. We are now over 14 million players. We won a BAFTA. We got nominated for every major game award. Recently, we won one of the first Peabodys for a video game. We're in the permanent. Well, we've had thousands of articles. When I could talk about how distribution works, but YouTube and Twitch is critical. We've had millions of views on YouTube and Twitch. We have fan art. People dress up as our characters. We're a question on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. We're sort of seeping into popular culture. There's been lots of studies about the game. We have a full, even though it wasn't designed for schools, we have a full curriculum for Alaska students around Alaska Native history. We certainly didn't design it for museums, but we're in dozens of museums around the world. Recently, we were selected to be part of the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art, and they actually did a big exhibit that just closed called Never Alone. We're in the Smithsonian. It's been a remarkable experience. It's changed all of our lives. We're 10 years into the partnership, and we're really just beginning. We've recently funded a much more ambitious sequel, which will also embed documentary films. And by the way, we've had 14 million folks on Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, every gaming platform, watch a documentary while immersing themselves in playing a game. And I think that mix of modalities is very powerful because film has certain affordances and weaknesses, games have a certain affordances and weaknesses. Put them together, very powerful. It's also an entirely new distribution channel for how to rise above the noise if you have a documentary film. Interestingly, we get approached by documentary filmmakers now very often wanting us to build a game around their documentaries. We recently did it with BBC Blue Planet 2, the documentary, and so that's something to think about for this group. We're doing many other things with our Alaska Native partners. We have an initiative around Fab Labs makerspaces. They now have some of the most pioneering Fab Labs in the world, and we've been collaborating. We have a company that does future world building with the guy who designed the movie Minority Report. They're doing future world building with elders, writers, and storytellers around the future of education from an Alaska Native perspective. So we're 10 years into the partnership. The Tribal Council took their profits, invested in our company. Our chairwoman is head of the Tribal Council. So it really has been a fascinating relationship. So I tell you that story partially relevant to this conference. We've been thinking a lot about investigative journalism, and we've wanted to explore that from a gaming perspective. And this is just this is their mission statement, which I just love. It's worth taking a moment and reading. I mean, I just think it's beautifully phrased, and they're very serious about that mission statement. I'll let you take a picture, and then I'll go on. It's on their website as well, the Cook Inlet Tribal Council. And by the way, I didn't have time to show the embedded documentaries in this talk, but if you Google Never Alone Game Cultural Insights, you can see all 26 of them. I mean, you won't have the context of the game, but you can get a sense for what they are. I'm going to switch now to our new project. If we can go to the next deck. We were approached, much like we were approached with the Alaska Native Tribal Organization, we were approached by an investigative journalist named Ian Urbina. A number of people in this group have funded his work. Yeah, here we go. He wrote a book called The Outlaw Ocean. He was at the New York Times for many years writing about what happens on the ocean outside of national borders, where there are essentially no laws, there are treaties that are largely unenforced, and it's a fascinating sort of landscape for journalism. We did an ocean exploration game with BBC where we explored the awe and wonder of the ocean under the water, which is absolutely magical, absolutely fascinating. The marine scientists, the aquanauts are amazing. But we didn't really think a lot about what happens on the top of the ocean. And it is a scary dystopian place because there are very few enforceable laws or treaties. It is a very dystopian place. And yet tens of millions of people work on the ocean. It absorbs 30% of carbon emissions. Lots of the products and services cross the ocean, and yet there are very few laws. It is a place with outlandish characters. Video games need really strong, interesting characters. As I mentioned, video games are about verbs. His reporting has all the action and thinking verbs you could imagine. And we get pitched impact games all the time, but Ian was so thoughtful about how he wants to approach the medium. He's left the New York Times. He has an independent nonprofit called the Outlaw Ocean Project, and he's doing very innovative documentaries, podcasts, animation, and really wanted to move into video games. And we've developed an inclusive development process, much like we worked with the Alaska Native elders, writers, and storytellers. His mission and our mission is to make this world that's largely invisible to most people visible to tens of millions of gamers. Everything we're doing in the project is inspired by him and his team and other similar investigative journalists. We abstract it when we tell the stories, when we put you into those worlds, but then we unlocked documentaries that he shot over the last 15 years to see the real world inspiration for the fictional game that you're playing that's inspired by the stories. So we're going to use that same mix of modalities. That's a little bit of our ocean game, which you can get a sense for. The game's going to have 3 different modes. I won't go into all the details because I don't have too much time, but you will step into the shoes of multiple characters. You will play a sea slave, a young man who was duped into thinking they were going to a construction job, ends up on a boat, not speaking the language, not understanding why they're on the boat, being brutalized to meet certain fishing quotas, and simply trying to survive. It'll become one of our major characters. There will be a sort of vigilante conservation organization that is attempting to put order to the disorder of the ocean, and there'll be a set of interesting characters there. You'll play a repo man who has to steal a 10,000-ton boat. These folks really exist. As a player, you're going to steal a 10,000-ton boat that was stolen from you. I mean, just amazing stuff that happened on the ocean. Again, all inspired by real stories. Ian's very interested in the idea of direct action versus systemic change. So players will explore direct action. Do I save this sea slave, or do I try to gather evidence and try to get it to a government or an NGO? And we're going to use a motion comic graphic novel means to tell the storytelling of how we set up these missions and how we explore the consequences at a personal or a systemic level. And we think it's a cost-effective, visually evocative way to do sort of very deep storytelling, but also consequences for the player's agency and action. And then we're going to have a global map where you're going to do a lot of work in terms of satellite tracking. There's amazing NGOs that do satellite tracking. Like when you do squid fishing, you have lights and you can track the lights from space to know where certain illegal fishing is happening. So we're going to have 3 different modes that we're putting together in the game. So it's quite ambitious. As I mentioned, we're going to unlock insights that are the documentaries. And if you go to the Outlaw Ocean Project website, Ian has a bunch of these documentaries. They're intense, they're hard to watch, but they're very powerful and very memorable. And so we're going to contextualize some of those, and we're going to shoot some new ones based on reporting that he's doing right now. By the way, 2 days ago, at this first day of this conference, he broke a major story in the New Yorker, 2 major stories, which you can read about. I'll let the stories speak for themselves, and you're going to see more of that reporting come out. So we believe we can, after this episode, we believe we can keep doing new episodes to keep pace with his and his compatriots' reporting. No one's really done investigative journalism video game as far as we know. So we want to kind of pioneer the field. And how you interview sources. There's a whole art to interviewing sources. How you infiltrate a location, how you gather evidence, how you analyze that evidence, how you get that evidence out there, what you do with it. All of that will be part of the gameplay. Another theory of change that I'm very interested in that we're going to explore, I mentioned this guy Alex McDowell who designed Minority Report. We have a design agency that designs future worlds for clients because almost every future vision in media right now is dystopian, which is a problem. And so how do we create aspirational visions of the future that people then can individually and collectively urge into existence? So we're going to invent things in the game that we want people to urge into existence in the real world. Like Ian mentioned that there's no Doctors Without Borders at sea, and yet because he boards these ships and he carries a medicine kit, and often simple medicine will save lives. So we were thinking, why don't we invent that NGO, integrate it in the game, and then urge somebody to do that in the real world. And that happens in movies all the time. Minority Report is famous for about 100 inventions where people saw it in the movie and then invented it in the world. But it doesn't just have to be cool technology, it could be social organizations. So we think that's a fascinating theory of change that not a lot of people have explored. You know, some of the material is pretty dark in here, and people say, you know, could you do a commercial game that has some of this intense dark material? Well, there's examples of that. There's a beautiful game. It's an intense game. It came out the same year as Never Alone, so we were on the sort of international award circuit together. We got to know them. It's a Polish company that did a game called This War of Mine, where you play 5 characters. It's a single-player game where what you call hot-swapping 5 characters, which is what we're doing with our Outlaw Ocean game. And you're in a fictional Eastern European city that's being torn apart by a war. I mean, you could look at that game and it's right out of what's happening in Kyiv and Ukraine right now. And it's a resource management game where you simply have to survive. So it's a war game, but you're playing it from a civilian's perspective. It's beautifully done. The gameplay is very powerful. And it was hugely financially successful, award-winning. So, you know, sometimes people want to go see a Marvel movie. Sometimes people want to go see Killing Fields or All the President Men or Spotlight. So there's a place in this very big industry for games that are provocative, that explore challenging themes, but they have to be done at a high level of craft. Good intentions aren't good enough. As the chairman of Games for Change, and we see tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars coming from governments, foundations, nonprofits, foundations, all trying to harness the power of this medium for some sort of learning, health, social impact. But very few rise above the noise in the consumer space or replace time or money in the classroom or are optimized for a very specific channel. You need talent and you need rigor, but the talent, the folks that have made a lot of these big games and some of the new young emerging talent are hungry to do meaningful content. So my job is to find that talent, find the social entrepreneurs or the investigative journalists, and then put the funding together, and we understand how to get these games out there and how to rise above the noise. We're very serious about the impact, so we think about how this can not only introduce the concept of investigative journalism, and by the way, there's a lot of research that show that movies and video games, when you have a powerful role model for a character, it inspires careers. SimCity has inspired many people to be city planners. Gina Davis, the actress, has a nonprofit called See Jane, where she researches how media representation inspires people to pursue careers. A lot of young women want to be CSI investigators because the shows are so evocative. I mean, she has hard data on this. And so, you know, we really think about the role models in the game and then inspiring people to become investigative journalists. Of course, we want to get people involved in the journalism itself. The game itself will support the journalism. Gamers are very generous. They donate money, so we believe, and the profits itself will go into the journalism. So we believe we can support the journalism, we can amplify the journalism, we can inspire careers, introduce new concepts. I mean, we're mapping all of that out as how we think about the impact. So we're at the same spot when I presented 10 years ago, Never Alone, and we had no idea what that would happen with that game, with this game. We're really just starting out. So if there are folks here who think this is interesting and want to go on that journey with us in any form, I'm happy to chat with you. So thank you very much.